Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation's LNTV. Now, the trial of Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd is one of the biggest stories of the decade. A lot rides on the verdict, and it would be a brave man who suggests that America won't face mostly peaceful riots and burning of cities if Chauvin is found innocent. Now, here to discuss what's happening in the case and the ramifications is Liberty Nation's legal affairs editor, Mr. Scott D. Cosenza, Esquire. Welcome, Scott.
Hi, Mark.
So, Scott, you've been keeping a close eye on the trial. What are both sides saying?
Well, the defense is trying to maintain the frame that the state has to meet its burden of beyond a reasonable doubt as the standard in the face of withering onslaught early on in the trial. And the state or the prosecution, the best spoken word argument they made to start off their case, Mark, was that while police officers are fraught with split-second decision-making that can be looked at in hindsight to their detriment, this was not a split-second decision, but a minute-by-minute long decision by Mr. Chauvin to act illegally in taking the life of Mr. Floyd.
Actually, I'd like to delve into that just a little bit, if I may. I'm pretty sure that the defense is going to argue that Mr. Chauvin followed police protocol in restraining Mr. Floyd.
Well, I suspect that is an argument that they will make, but they have yet to do so in the courtroom.
Okay. And obviously you and I, we don't know what the standard police protocol is as of yet, correct?
Well, police officers often have a kind of toolbox of what they're allowed to do, right? And so I suspect that they will argue that he was allowed to do what he did, but we're unlikely to see any testimony that a specific thing was required at a specific time or place, just because if you think of the mechanics of that in police work, to have to reference like, okay, now if he's on here, I have to do this. But it's generally speaking like you're allowed to do certain things and you're not allowed to do other things. And that's sort of where most of these things, they fall into one of those buckets.
Okay, Scott, you mentioned in a recent article on libertynation.com titled Trial Checkmate, Shocking Video Starts the Floyd Prosecution. This was referring to the first day of opening arguments. And you mentioned that it's fortunate for Mr. Chauvin that the opening arguments won't decide the verdict. Could you explain a little bit on that?
Yes, Mark. And what I think was a masterstroke by the prosecution at the conclusion of their spoken oral arguments, they played the bystander tape where Mr. Floyd cries out in agony over minutes for his mama to not be killed until he loses consciousness and slips away into oblivion. All the while, the bystanders are begging, pleading, screaming, demanding that they do something, the police that is, about Chauvin and the other officers restraining Floyd to his death as the tape appears. So it's after you see that, Mark, I think, let's say like the next day or whatever, there were doctors who said, well, Mr. Floyd would have died anyway because of drugs he ingested or his physical condition, which is what I expect the defense will bring to the table. Even still, to see that video and see what happens, it's such a impactful, the value of that for the prosecution, I don't think can be understated. And, I hadn't seen that video, Mark, in months, and you forget just really what it does to you to watch this person seemingly die right before your eyes while begging not to.
Was the video the shortened version, or I presume it wasn't the full length beginning with the first interaction?
It did not include the police's first interaction with Mr. Floyd that day. This was a bystander video that started after he was at the car and out of the car. Okay,
so presumably the defense will likely use
after he was at the police car and out of the police car, not out of what was the vehicle that he was operating that day.
Okay, so yeah, we can presume that the defense will probably use the extended version as almost like a right of reply.
Well, not only that, Mark, they have the video from the year prior, which they'll introduce when Mr. Floyd was caught with drugs. Again, this is a video that most people just haven't seen because I hate to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but because it doesn't fit the narrative that Mr. Floyd was a relatively law-abiding person with the exception of his struggle with addiction. And this was a day in the life that, doesn't mark the man, but in fact, the opposite is true with Mr. Floyd. Not that he deserved to die, but he was a career criminal who fueled his addiction with these crimes. And he had basically an MO that it seems like when he was encountered by police, he would scream and cry and beg for his mama and scream out, "Don't kill me," all the while not showing his hands and eating the drugs that he had on him. So we know for sure, this is on video of him doing this prior to the events of the day where he died. So those video bits, Mark, I think are going to be most illuminating for the jury. And if I haven't seen them, or most people haven't seen them, I doubt that the jurors have seen those videos. In fact, I know they haven't, because they would have had to testify that they did see them during the voir dire process, and they didn't say so. So that, I presume, will be eye-opening.
I believe, as Tim Donner pointed out to you on a recent Uprising podcast, a production of LibertyNation.com, a great podcast that you can check out yourselves, readers, that it's voir dire.
There you go. Thank you for correcting.
You're quite right. Now, we obviously can't do a George Floyd segment here without talking about race as a primary factor. And it seems to me, just as a layman, that the prosecution is absolutely trying to put the race of the actors here front and center, and the defense is trying to do the opposite. As a lawyer yourself, is it a smart way? Could it backfire on the prosecution or the defense to do so?
Race surrounds and infuses this trial in a way that it can't be removed, I think. It's dripping with it, Mark, at every turn. Okay.
Now, one more question on how the lawyers are doing. Obviously, the defense is being headed up by Mr. Keith Ellison, I believe, who was a former attorney general.
The prosecution, Mark, is being directed by Minnesota's Attorney General, Keith Ellison. Yes.
Okay. And the defense is being headed up by a lawyer who's in the employ of Mr. Chauvin or part of the police union.
So attorneys in the United States of America represent their clients. They may be paid by any party, but they work for and represent their clients. So Mr. Eric Nelson is the name of Chauvin's defense attorney, and he works for Chauvin. Now, he's being paid by basically a union benefit that Chauvin had because at the time of the incident and his arrest, he was a police officer entitled to this benefit. So they're funding, the union that is funding the defense.
Scott, I have to ask you, how do you think it's going to turn out? The trial finishes in roughly 3.5 weeks, we believe. How do you think it's going to turn out?
Mark, my prediction is pain. Pain for the country, pain for the participants, pain all around.
Scott Cosenza, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Mark.
That's it for this edition of Liberty Nation TV. Remember to hit Liberty Nation News for original articles, the Uprising and Rabbit Hole podcasts, and our signature television program, The Conservative 5. Just go to libertynation.com on your browser, or hit Rumble, YouTube, or check out our Liberty Nation News Roku channel. I'm Mark Angelides. Thanks for watching. This program is a production of libertynation.com, conservative news where truth matters.
Who are we? We are Americans that believe in liberty. We are a project of the nonprofit One Generation Away. We are patriots who apply the founding principles to the issues of today.
And they keep moving the goalposts on us.
We are educators and commentators who love America and the Constitution. Who are we? We are Liberty Nation.